We still talk, just not the same way. And the strange thing was, nothing insisted that it had changed. I had expected distance to be obvious, a silence I could hear, a gap I could measure, a quiet tension in the space between words that wouldn't let me ignore it. But there wasn't one. Not loudly, not clearly, not in a way that marked a difference. There was no visible distance, no emotional withdrawal, no dramatic shift in how we spoke. It was quieter than that. It was gradual. It was internal. It was steady. From the outside, nothing looked different. We still spoke when we needed to. We still answered when something was asked. We still moved through conversations as usual. Nothing about the exchange suggested anything had changed. And yet, something inside it had. Not suddenly, not forcefully, just quietly enough to exist. I noticed it in the absence of familiarity, the moment where something once felt effortless, the pause where something used to feel natural, the space where I once felt completely understood, and this time I didn't. That was new. The difference didn't arrive as tension. It arrived as the disappearance of something unspoken. I wasn't responding with the same ease anymore. I wasn't feeling the same connection in what was said. I wasn't moving through conversations without noticing the difference. And nothing felt unstable. I was still present, still aware, still steady, but I wasn't experiencing the same closeness. Words existed without the same weight. Responses remained without the same meaning. Conversations continued without the same depth, and nothing collapsed. I could move through an entire conversation with everything sounding the same without feeling it the same way. Nothing required explanation. It was more like distance without separation, as if something between us had shifted slightly without needing to be addressed. And the more I noticed that, the more I realized something else. How much I had expected change to come with silence. How often I assumed distance meant the absence of words. How I believed that difference would be easy to recognize. But this wasn't about silence. It was about subtlety. Not strong enough to interrupt us. Not clear enough to define. Just steady enough to remain. I began to notice how quiet it was. A slight difference in how things felt. A soft distance where there used to be ease. A small shift in something I couldn't fully explain, but nothing demanded attention. And that was the shift. Everything between us stayed the same, but the way it felt had softened. I paid attention to how subtle that was, how stable it remained, how little urgency it created. If someone had asked whether anything had changed, I would have said no, and meant it honestly. That was the surprising part. I had always believed distance would be obvious, that change would feel disruptive, that something would clearly be missing. But some changes don't remove anything. They simply alter it. I noticed it in repetition, the same conversations, the same responses, the same familiar patterns, everything recognizable, yet not identical. I didn't need a clear explanation. I didn't need a specific moment. I didn't need to define what had changed, and nothing felt broken. That awareness changed something, because once you realize that closeness can shift without disappearing, you stop looking for clear signs. I began to see how often I had relied on obvious distance. If something changed, I expected it to become visible. If something felt different, I expected it to be named. But this wasn't like that. The space between us didn't grow into silence. It remained subtle, like something slightly adjusted without needing to be corrected, like a conversation that continued without feeling the same. Like a connection that softened without disappearing. And the more I noticed that softness, the more I accepted it. There was no need to question it, no need to fix it, no need to return things to how they were. It simply remained part of how we spoke. And in that steadiness, I found something unexpected, not confusion, not discomfort, not disconnection, just awareness. An awareness that didn't need explanation. Everything continued as usual. Time moved forward. Words were exchanged. The rhythm stayed intact. And I moved within it, while something quietly felt different. I noticed it in my responses, in the pauses between sentences, in the absence of what once felt immediate. The difference didn't need attention. It didn't need to be fixed. It wasn't disruptive. The structure of everything stayed intact. The conversations continued. The ordinary exchanges remained. But something between us no longer felt exactly the same within it. Not because I avoided it, but because I noticed it. Even simple conversations felt different. What once felt effortless now felt slightly distant. What once felt complete now felt slightly altered. The familiarity shifted. I didn't need to understand it to recognize it. I just noticed that something had moved, and that awareness was subtle. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a realization. It was quiet. And because it was quiet, it felt stable. Sometimes I listened for the old closeness, just to see if it would return, but it didn't. Not lost, not removed, just changed. I didn't explain it to anyone. There was nothing clear to describe, but I carried that quiet difference with me through the same conversations and the same moments, aware that not all distance creates silence. There was nothing to fix, no silence to fill, no clear break to address. The shift between us was not an ending. It was simply different. And different does not mean gone. It moved with me in small ways, in how I listened, in how I responded, in how I noticed what used to feel automatic. I let that difference exist without trying to return it to what it was. The strange thing was how natural that felt. We still spoke the same way. Our conversations still continued. Everything still moved forward. Nothing outward transformed. Nothing dramatic unfolded. And yet, something between us had quietly shifted. Not loudly, not urgently, just steadily. As if something had changed without needing to break first. And the absence of silence no longer meant nothing had changed. It meant something had adjusted. Like words that didn't carry the same weight. Like conversations that didn't hold the same depth. Like a connection that didn't disappear, but didn't remain exactly the same. And once I stopped expecting it to return, nothing felt unclear. Because not everything needs to stop to become something else. We still talk, just not the same way.